Free fonts or paid fonts? Which ones are better? Hey folks, today we're going to talk about fonts, and specifically paid fonts versus free fonts, to see if one is better than the other. Now there's actually three categories I'm going to talk about today with regards to fonts. We're going to talk about system fonts or bundled software fonts, along with free fonts and paid for commercial fonts. So let's start with the system fonts. These are ones that come pre-bundled with your operating system or any software that you'll install onto your computer or device. System fonts tend to be fairly limited. We're talking fonts like Arial, Myriad, Calibri, those types of things, and they all have a certain similar look to them, apart from one notorious one, and that one is Comic Sans. All I will say is, if you can, stay away from Comic Sans. It's not the greatest font in the world, and there are better ones out there that you can use. If you install a piece of design software, for example, on your computer, it will probably expand the library of fonts that you have available. But a word of warning, usually the licenses for these fonts are linked to the software. So if you uninstall the software from your computer, you are essentially removing your right to use the fonts which were installed with that software. When you uninstall software, the fonts will probably remain on your system. So to you, you can see that as being fonts that you can still use. But in reality, you're actually breaking the licensing rules of that font. So it's always best to double check when you do install some software what the licensing agreement is for those fonts. So what are the advantages and the disadvantages of system-based fonts? Well, the advantage is they're already on your system, so you don't have to download them or look for any new fonts online, and they tend to be of a fairly high quality. The disadvantages are there is a limited choice of fonts open to you, and you'll be using the same fonts as thousands of other businesses around the world. So let's move on to free fonts. For a lot of people, they may have very tight design budgets, and so having to pay for fonts is not on the cards. The first thing to say about free fonts is that free doesn't always mean free. Like system fonts, every single font has a license agreement attached to it. So when you go to a free font website, what you need to do is you need to check the license which is attached to any font that you're thinking about downloading and using in your project. You will find that a lot of fonts which say they're free are free for personal use. They're not free to use commercially. So if you want to use that font to produce a piece of marketing material for your business or service, you will have to probably buy a commercial license to use that font in that way. If you're not sure whether a font does need a commercial license, you will find when you download it, it will probably come with a little README file, a little text document, and that will contain all the details and the usage rights of that font license. A lot of free fonts are actually created by amateurs and hobbyists. They may look okay on screen at fairly small sizes, but if you need to use the fonts at large sizes, or maybe you need some special characters in the font, that's where you'll start to see that free fonts are fairly limited, or they're not actually that well designed. Because they're done by hobbyists, they won't have spent a huge amount of time on them compared to someone who creates fonts professionally. Now, in saying that, if you go to Google Fonts, for example, because it's Google, all of the fonts that they have are of a high quality, but they may be limited in the weights that are available to you. So you may get bold and medium, but you may not get semi-bold, black, heavy, condensed. All the different types of font family that you could potentially have will not be readily available from a free font. Now, advantages and disadvantages of free fonts. Number one, it's free. That's obviously an advantage. You've got a huge choice of styles to choose from. And because they're free, you can download as many as you want and experiment with them. Use them for inspiration when you're putting together your design projects. Disadvantages: you have a limited choice of weights for each font. They can be poorly constructed, and a bit like system fonts, they may be overused because you aren't having to pay for them, and so people will just download them as many times as they need, and so you might find a lot of other people using the exact same fonts that you are. Now we move on to paid fonts. It will come as no surprise to you that paid fonts are of a much higher quality than free ones. That's because the designers who create them spend a huge amount of time polishing them, making sure that there are as many characters, ligatures and glyphs in there as possible, lots of different weights. There is just so much more you get by paying for a font. The same as with free fonts, you have to deal with license agreements for paid fonts. Now with paid ones, they can be a little bit more tricky and a little bit more detailed, but as long as you read the agreement and know what the limitations are with the font, then you'll be fine and you won't have any problems. A plus to using a paid font is that not everyone else will be. A lot of people will have gone down the free route, whereas if you go and take the time and use some budget to buy a commercial font, then there's going to be less people using it, which means you're going to have more originality in your branding compared to someone who will be using free fonts. The advantages of paid for fonts are they are of a high quality, you have much more choice over weights, glyphs and ligatures, and you'll also have no copyright issues because you've paid for use of the font. Disadvantages are the license agreements, because they can differ between different font foundries, so you need to make sure you read those carefully to ensure that you're using the fonts within the license agreement terms. And paid fonts can be expensive. They can range from £10 into the hundreds depending on the font family that you want to use. So where does that leave us? Which is better, free or paid fonts? Well, they both have their advantages and their disadvantages, and it really comes down to what you need the font to do. In some cases, free fonts will be absolutely perfect for what you need, but in other instances, you will want to make the decision to spend some of your budget and buy a commercial font, especially if it's for a really, really important piece of your branding. I hope you found this quick insight into free and paid fonts useful. If you have, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone that you think might find it useful. And until I speak to you again, stay creative, folks.